Do you have a favourite spot, or does that remain sort of a secret? I mean, around the world, is there one?
Oh, it depends how I'm feeling, exactly. I mean, it's some days, right now, I'm very attracted to the Scottish Islands because that's part of my former lifetime was in that part of the world. I love Scotland.
Yeah.
I love the purity of the sites. And for me, that's what I need right now. There's one in the middle of the South Island of New Zealand, which is perennially my favorite because it's hard to get to. It's expensive to get to. You've got to fly a long way to get there. But the energy is so pure. So, in fact, I'm about to write a beginning of a new book on that. I'll be able to find out things about a culture that no one knows about from prehistory in New Zealand. And it's all because of sitting there with those stones and they're showing me what's going on. That is powerful. It's hard to put into words because you have to experience it. So it depends where I am and what I'm doing. It changes.
Your energy, though, your energy, obviously over the years, has become a lot more refined.
It's also like you sitting in the car. You feel a certain way one morning, and you're kind of feeling a bit dour one day. And you think, I think I'll put this song on today, make myself feel better. Yeah. Well, next day you feel better. You don't need that song. You need another type of music. Yeah. So one day it'll be punk, one day it'll be classical, one day it'll be rock, one day it'll be Brazilian. It depends on how your mood is. And, I was just in Cornwall, where I have a lot of favorite places, and they're being wrecked by English heritage. They're being wrecked by private development. There's one called St. Nectans, which has been completely wrecked. It's supposed to be a place that is protected in a wilderness. It's a waterfall guarded there by a cave, which is an old cave where a monk used to hide to do his out-of-body otherworld journeys. And in fact, it turns out his name is actually a guardian of the otherworld. And it was a place of seclusion where you go to immerse yourself in nature. Well, now there's a gift shop, the coffee shop. There's an interpretation center. I don't know how they got away with this. Yeah. Someone in Cornwall is very corrupt in the government down there. And I put a request in to find out how they got away with this. But they've cut down mature trees just so people having a cup of tea can have a view of the waterfall. Yeah. And it's no longer a sacred site. It's now wrecked. Yeah. And Tintagel slowly going the same way. And people don't understand the true meaning of Tintagel. It's much bigger than King Arthur. Arthur has very little to do with it. It goes back much deeper. In fact, it's the same concept as the Great Pyramid of Egypt. Once you actually look at this, of what it's doing and how it's built up from the cave all the way through the island, because Tintagel Island is hollow, and it goes up to a well at the top, and there's a chamber there where they used to do their out-of-body, otherworld ceremonies. It's the same concept as the Great Pyramid. So you don't have to travel to Egypt to experience the Great Pyramid. It's actually in Tintagel Island. So go there when it's quiet. It's a different place.
Do you have other favourite places in Cornwall that you can think of?
Rosh, which is kind of funny because they call it Rosh Rock, which is kind of saying rock. But Rosh, again, it was recently revamped by the Cornwall Council. I don't know what they've done to it. I haven't been back there in 3 years. But there was an old hermitage. And again, it's linked to an association between the hermit and the other world, which tells me a lot about what was going on there. And it's a volcanic anomaly. The rock is highly magnetic. And if you go there on a quiet day, usually in the winter, you can have that sort of hermetic experience and leave the body for a bit. It's a good place to meditate. The one, Menantol is another one, the stone with a hole. Sounds better as Menantol, doesn't it?
Yes.
And it's naturally radioactive. The story goes, you go through it 7 times and you are healed, and mothers still take their sick children there to heal them. It's like a very cheap CAT scan. It's the same concept when you actually look at it. They're everywhere. One of my favorites is still Avebury. I enjoy that.
Which they're now saying is square. Did you see that? There was a thing in the newspaper.
I have, yes. And you know what? So there's a researcher, a well-known researcher in England, just emailed me giving me a hard time that I got it all wrong. Actually, I didn't get it wrong. It's a different point of view. It turns out that actually it's not the square that's important. There's a rectangle. The extra stones that they've actually found create a rectangle. And I thought, I know exactly what that is. And I've actually it's on my website right now. It's a brand new page that shows that the original rectangle around the obelisk is the original site from where they measured the angles of the lunar standstills. Mm-hmm. Because Avebury is a lunar temple. All the stones are designed to calibrate the 2 calendars of the moon, and the outside stones calibrate the lunar cycle every 8 years with the solar cycle. So there's X number of stones, exactly where they should be. But in order to find out what it was doing, you'd have to have this a measurement of the actual positions of the extreme locations of the moon over the course of 19.5 years. When you put those on the ground, they create that rectangle, and I've overlaid the actual position of the moon in relationship to the archaeological finding, and it fits. So I think I might be onto something, but it gets weirder, because from the obelisk, where at the center of the rectangle, the only place where you can see the top of Silbury Hill that's cut off from the slope of Wadden Hill in between the two. So it's a magical sort of what they call a spirit hole that connects one side to the other. And it just happens that in 2650 BC, which is the rumored date when the final construction was closed between the two sites, at the spring equinox, Sirius appears right over Silbury Hill from that vantage point. The star associated with wisdom, which is what that place was also used for. It's magic. It's absolute magic.
Satisfying to sort of align this up.
We have a lot of stuff in Britain. We really do. It's like the library of the planet. We're very blessed to have this place. I just wish the pound would collapse so I can afford to move back.
Freddy, do you have time? Do you have 10 more minutes?
Yeah, why not?
Are you sure?
Yeah.
Can I ask? Well, okay. But if you're suddenly not there, I totally understand. I wanted to ask you very quickly about Gobekli Tepe, and obviously people who are fairly sort of new to all this subject matter. One or two people have heard of Gobekli Tepe, and I know that you
can pronounce it.
Can pronounce it. And I know you wrote about it sort of years ago, and obviously sort of Graham Hancock has kind of has sort of raised its profile over the last few years and speaks about it a lot. But I should just explain that this is a site in Turkey for viewers. Could you say a little bit about it?
It's in the central part of the western Turkey, not far from the site of Noah's Ark, which, by the way, if you go on Google Earth, you can actually see Noah's Ark on the side of Mount Ararat. It's still there. It was actually measured with magnetometers, and they found the ribs of the ship and everything. And it's part of a very old complex of temples in that vicinity, created by people that apparently were sky watchers. They were astronomers. And it goes back to at least before the flood, and that the entire hill consists. It's an artificial hill, basically. It consists of at least 13 stone circles, and they only have dug up 5% of this. So it's a massive, massive site, and it's something that we're going to be keeping our eyes on for many, many years. So it's magical. I actually put my head on the line a bit, because when I originally wrote about it, they hadn't done much of the excavations, and I was writing about a civilization that happened before the Great Flood, and I found a piece of evidence from ice core samples in Greenland that dated a massive, massive global catastrophe to exactly, 9,703 BC, and there's nothing else anywhere close to it. I figured, well, that must have been the big flood caused by the impact of 7 meteorites, or the breakup of a meteorite into 7 pieces, which we now know to be correct. And the information was just coming in from Gobekli Tepe, from the late archaeologist. I can't remember his name now, German guy, fantastic person. And he was skeptical that even the date of 8,000 BC was too early. And I thought, you know what, he's absolutely right. Because look at the way that they packaged the whole temple as though they meant to protect it, because it was deliberately buried, but carefully buried, as though they expected it to be protected for some big catastrophe, and they had hoped to come back and dig it back out again. I mean, why else would you do that? You could have just covered it up with earth and that's it, it's done. But no, it's almost like it was so beautifully packaged as if they expected it to be protected and they expected to return to it after a big problem. And I said at the time that this thing must be at least 11,000 years old. And a few years after that, it was proven by carbon-14 dating that yes, it precedes that date by about 500 years. So they knew it was coming. That's why they had an obsession with the stars. And you look at this in stone circles all around the world, the obsession with the stars to a point which is impractical for the people that build these sites. They would have been dead long before any of the measurements they put into the sites would have taken place. So why do you want to track the skies over a 26,000 year period? It doesn't make sense unless you're trying to warn people in the future that these catastrophes are regular, and they are. And even NASA now is very concerned about what's coming around the skies, because Earth every year. It goes through, for example, the Taurid meteor shower. It takes 2 weeks to travel through this debris field, and that's the big one. That's the one where all these big collisions seem to happen throughout history. And Gobekli Tepe, I believe, was part of this massive device, part of which was used to calculate these cyclical changes. The whole hill literally is called the belly. The hill in the belly, which means it's a navel place. And like all navels of the earth, they are places of descent from where the gods. This is where you start getting to a bit of, were they aliens? Were they extraterrestrials? Were they spirit bodies? Were they metaphors? I don't know, but I know from the myths that wherever you talk about a navel of the earth, like Cusco or Easter Island or Gobekli Tepe, these were places of the descent of the gods, and they were real. They were a little bit taller than us human beings, but they were not very different from us. They were described as white, sometimes with beards, and they appear in every culture in the world. And it's a place where these people who had complete understanding of the laws of nature hardwired their understanding.
That's the extraordinary thing. They suddenly appeared, didn't they? I mean, it was
just out of nowhere.
Yeah.
I believe, and I'm writing a book on this right now. It's very hard to prove, and the information, of course, it's gone because it's a flood wiped out everything. I found out that the waves were at least 3 miles high, and they were proved to be true because the impact sites happen in deep water. When you have a deep water impact from a meteorite, you can create a tsunami by the correct terms of, simulations in tanks in laboratories. Yeah. They simulated the fact that, yes, these waves were 3 miles high. That's exactly what the myths were saying. In Tibet, they were talking about the waves coming from the ocean and touching the summits of the mountains. I mean, that's a long way inland and very high up. So they were right, and all the information is now basically gone. It's under the water.
Suddenly you've got, out of nowhere, you've got this technology, the people there who are obviously very advanced.
Yeah.
Yet,
I think they'll live on islands.
But out of nowhere, I mean, they just kind of basically, there's no...
That's what always puzzled me. But, I believe in UFOs. I understand aliens exist. Yeah. I don't really research them, but I come into contact with people that do, and I come in contact with indigenous people that, for them, it's like having tea with your uncle. Yeah. It's like, they come here every few weeks. What's the big problem? Yeah. And I figured, but that somehow doesn't quite sit right with me. I think that there was another civilization of humanoids here on Earth who were a little bit different from us. They knew more than we did, but they also were clever enough to understand that if you know more and are more advanced in whatever way to other humans, you don't interact with them. You let them develop at their own pace. But it's very dangerous when, for example, we in the 21st century, going into deepest Borneo, and this has happened, you bump into a tribe of natives that are still going around without clothes, without any social structure, and you have irreversibly changed their natural development. And there are, anthropological studies that have been done with this that say, yes, we irreversibly changed the course of that culture, because they went back a year later and they kept very quiet. They didn't want to be seen again. And they suddenly realized that they're talking about gods that came here from the trees, from the mountains. And suddenly they had banana leaves on their wrists to show that they were like the gods. And they had loincloths. And the people with loincloths, they imitated the gods. And they now were the leaders of the tribe. So they already had developed a hierarchical structure. I am better than you. And you should do as I say, because I am like the gods. So you see, you completely changed it. Yeah. So going back to this theory that I'm working on, I think these people all lived on islands, because after the flood, you have these groups of 7 sages that suddenly knew everything. They brought in culture, they rebuilt civilization in the middle of the Andes, in the middle of Easter Island, in the middle of New Zealand, in the middle of every single part of the world. They always came over the ocean. They were always dressed differently. They seemed to have control over the laws of nature. They could propel themselves across the sky and across the water. And they appeared, they created the laws of agriculture, animal husbandry, how to build temples, how to build shelters properly, and get yourself up from a level of complete and utter devastation and rebuild your culture. And suddenly, this all matches up, because it will disappear back into the ocean. And I'm thinking, if they lived on islands and kept separate from themselves, their islands are gone. Their islands did not survive the cataclysm. They had no choice but to go onto the dry land and go, you know what, our responsibility is to restart civilization. We have to interact with Neanderthals and give them the basis of civilization. And any culture you want to talk to around the earth talks about the same thing, that they were given their culture from a state of depravity and general caveman-like existence by these gods, which were taller, unusual white people with beards, and they seemed to be able to move stones through the air by the use of sound. You can't make that stuff up, because apparently none of these people talked to each other 11,000 years ago. So how do they have the same story? Diffusion doesn't account for it. So also in Europe especially, you'll find that the oldest sacred sites are always on the coast. The deeper you go, the younger they get. So it seems to fit in the theory that I have that, yeah, civilization came out of islands after a catastrophe into the land and moved inland after that. How I'm going to prove all this, I don't know, but I'm sure I will.
Is that your next?
My next project. You'd think I'd try something simple, but I guess not.
I mean, there's so much. I mean, it's like trying to pour a kind of waterfall, isn't it, into a cup with you? Because there's just so much. We haven't even touched on so many things, from the Templars to your latest book, which is the Lost Art of Resurrection.
The Lost Art of Resurrection. That's a good one.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like back with the Divine Blueprint. I talked about that. I mean, Graham Hancock was actually working on the same concept from the other side of the world. I had no idea. And we ended up coming to the same concept, that the Earth was divided into certain mathematical proportions, like lines of longitude. But these numbers relate to the precessional cycle of the Earth. So it's high mathematics. You have to understand that the Earth wobbles over a 29,000-year period and so forth. Yeah. And you find that wherever these lines hit, you get the world's oldest sacred sites and enablers of the Earth. Yeah. But there was one missing, and it's in the middle of the Atlantic. And I thought, And it was in the Azores.
Word, is it?
Is the next there on the map? It's in the book. It says there's something missing there. And I put the line in, hoping to fix in the position later on. Well, would you believe it? 4 years after I wrote that, I landed in the Azores on the way to Lisbon, and another guy by the name of Silva, we're not related, I said I don't think we are, happened to find on a fishing trip, he was a veterinarian, he's going out fishing in the Azores, and he found on his sonar an underwater pyramid, 80 feet below sea level. And I thought, oh my God, let me check my map. He's actually about 40 miles off. And I just wrote to him, and I hadn't got any response, so I think he's hiding. So many people have been onto him. I said, if you happen to go 40 miles to the east of where you were, which is still in the Azores, I think you're going to find something very big. You probably found the outlier of what was a big civilization there. So amazing how these coincidences suddenly add up.
How extraordinary. So, I mean, you've got tons of material then for the next book.
Well, it's in bits and pieces. Like I said, I'm talking about a civilization of which there's so little record of, but there are echoes of it everywhere. So I'm probably going to spend a lot of time in the Far East, because they know much more than we do. I mean, all our understanding of ancient history comes from a very arrogant European Victorian point of view. It said that, we white people are so supreme that anyone outside of Northern Europe is a moron. Actually, I'm turning out that, and we've all read these books, and 15 years later, I'm actually realizing, we know so little compared to Polynesia and China and Japan. It's just that none of that stuff ever gets translated into English, so we don't know about it. And I'm beginning to come across this stuff bit by bit and recognizing that their stories are even older. Like Graham Hancock actually found some of them in the Vedas of the Tamil culture. And they talk about the academies of the gods in 15,000 BC. It's actually written on there, and they're now no longer here. They're actually under the waves because the sea level's risen over the years, and they're now having to go further and further inland. The academy is now at Arunachala in southern India. So you see how they know much more about the age of civilization, and the fact that before Neanderthals, there was also the time of the gods. And I think they're absolutely right. If they were that stupid, how would they make up these wonderful stories? The two don't go together. There's a lack of logic there.
So we have to go through almost a kind of deprogramming, don't we? I mean, maybe, is that what the sacred sites do as well? In a way, is give us something. I mean, they just kind of strip us away from,
Oh, they strip you very naked, believe me. If you want to do that, yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you want to go and then, and be honest with yourself and say, why did I come here? And have a hard birth, I get slapped on the bum the moment I come out of my mother's womb. It's going to hurt. Yeah. I want to make it worthwhile until I die, and I think, and that's my journey. And I ask myself, well, if I'm going to have a hard life, I want to make it worthwhile. I'm going to strip myself bare, go to the site, and find out what am I about. What's my plan here? What am I doing here to make the place a better place? What can I learn to teach other people to make their lives better? And believe me, the stuff comes straight at you, and it surprises me all the time.
I cannot think of a better person, Freddy, to actually relate. To articulate that and actually give us it in a way that's accessible. And I can see it's extraordinarily complex, but you have a way of relaying the information. So it's kind of Angkor Wat and all those sort of places you'd like to kind of look at those
I'd love to go there. I'm scared of needles. I can't do injections, and they need a lot of injections. I've got to find a way around that. Angkor Wat has been loved to death. The water table is receding because of the amount of tourists. And it's actually the site is sinking, so better get there quickly before it gets ruined. But they just discovered another huge part of it, the jungle. I don't think it's that young. I think it's based on a much older ground plan. There's no way they could have built 60 square miles of temples to that level of craftsmanship in that short of time. Although ironically, the time when they were the high point of Angkor was at the same time that in Europe they're building the Gothic cathedrals. There's a relationship there. And I'm not sure what it is, but there's so much in that part of the world that we still don't know about, and it's beautiful. It goes back a long time.
History is always written by the victors, isn't it? And so much.
Yes. And we just found there was a pyramid that was found in New Zealand, which hardly anyone knows about, and I've seen the top of it. And yes, there is a pyramid buried under a lot of ash there. The Mari didn't build it; they didn't build with stone, and it's been kept very quiet. People talk about it being just a wall, but no, I've actually been there. I've seen. I used to study geology, so I know at least what I'm looking at. And sometimes nature does make things in square lines. Given the right situation, the right geology, nature can do straight lines. So when you see these blocks which are uniformly cut, what you look at the striation in the stone. Does it match, even though there's a crack? If it does match, obviously it's natural. But if one striation is there and the other striation is there, that is not natural. It's been put there by someone. And these are blocks that look just like the building blocks of the Great Pyramid. And there's a section which you actually wholly jump into, perfectly level, and you fall onto it and it goes boom. There's an actual hollow room under there. That is not natural. So we'll wait and see what happens. But that's also on one of those lines of longitude that I had on my map. It's possibly something that's pre-diluvial. I don't know. And
have you been to Bali? And that's have you been?
Sorry?
Have you been to Bali on your trip?
No, still haven't made it down there.
Yeah. So that's.
I'm looking for that. Yes. That crowd-funded source to find me, but it'll get there eventually. It's probably not. I'm not ready for it yet. I need to know more. There's a lot of interesting things in Southeast Asia, for certain. So I got to do my homework a little bit more when the time's ready.
I have a kind of resonance there. I was born and brought up there, and in Malaysia, and so I have that. I don't know, real draw. I think to go back. And,
perhaps you should do it.
I don't know about that. No, but. Freddie, thank you so much. That's been really incredibly generous all that time.
You lend me a pint, don't worry.
I will. No, it was going to be my next question. But are you still going from? Because you're coming over in September, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm leading a group to Scotland. Favourite places of mine, and then I'm going to do. I'm doing England as well. I'm doing back-to-back tours of England, and then I would
love to. Put on a talk for you next time you're in the UK.
I'd love to. I'd love to. It's difficult.
What is it? It's funny, isn't it? Because America closed in some ways, but it's so much more open, isn't it, in others, isn't it? I mean, it's just...
it is funny. I think we're just very cynical in Britain. I think we have so much of this around us that we tend to forget how lucky we are. Yeah. When you move to somewhere like the States where everything was annihilated, in fact, they didn't actually build many sacred sites. The native cultures understood where the sacredness of the land was. They know where the hot spots of energy are. They just stand on it. There's a mound culture here for sure, and a very important one. And I think it's because there's so little of it here that people are much more open-minded about it. They want to know much more, and they're able to, and they're also in a position to have much more discretionary income where they can actually pay you to do these things. Whereas in England, it's much more expensive, and you tend to have to pay, save money for your Southwest Rail ticket, and then you've got no money to pay the lecturer or buy a book. So I understand the mechanics of economics. But at the same time, I think it's just because we live in a very cynical culture in England, which is why I left. I didn't think I was making any progress getting this information across. And I'm going, well, where can I go where people do want to hear about this? Otherwise, why am I doing this? And here it seems to have been a means to an end. So this is my base. And But God, it'd be nice to come home and have warm beer again.
I bet, even for
and a doner kebab. Oh God, I do like kebab.
Too bad we can't do a kind of virtual one. Send it through. You know that's only a matter of time. A 3D
Wow.
a 3D printer.
They've just announced yesterday that they teleported something into space.
I saw that. The Chinese. Yeah.
Absolutely. I can't wait to get a doner kebab delivered across the Atlantic. Wouldn't that be great? And it's still warm as well.
That'd be brilliant.
Yeah. Why is it growing in the dark?
Yeah.
Wait, you missed the horse.
Yeah. But don't you think
last time I spoke with Graham was at the Edgar Casey conference in Virginia Beach.
Oh, great.
Briefly, I mean, we're going between stages, and then he had to go somewhere else. So, in fact, he's right here right now. And he came here to Portland, Maine, of all places, about 8 years ago, or maybe 7, I can't remember. And I couldn't believe he was here. I sent him an email. I said, do you want some help promoting it? And he said, oh, I'd love to. We got no one booked so far. And I figured, I'll email my mailing list here, and they'll be more than happy to show up. And they have a full house, so he owes me several beers.
He certainly does.
I'm make sure he doesn't forget about that. So that was a lovely guy. I mean, obviously he takes a lot more of the arrows that we do. He gets a lot more of the exposure, but he's paid a big price for being outspoken. But if it wasn't for people like him, I wouldn't be here. I mean, he was a huge influence in my life and many others. So it's all part of the.
I suppose because he started looking into the whole ayahuasca DMT thing and all of that as well, didn't he? So that became a very controversial area for a lot of people. And that's
I've got a very funny story about Graham and Daniel Pinchbeck. I hope they were trying to convince me to come to New York and do ayahuasca, and I thought, so what happens? And I said, well, you have to do a fast. I go, well, I don't like fasting, but apart from that, what you do? Well, you drink this, and then you have to be near a bathroom because you lose control of your
purging
functions. Apart from that,
he knows how to sell it.
Yeah. Apart from that, what did the Romans do for us? Said, then you see these beautiful visions. Okay, so what do you see? Oh, we get these brightly coloured serpents, and I'm a cobrophobiac. I mean, I have a deep fear of snakes. I'm going, that's what you put yourself for this thing for, to see snakes? Well, then you get these visions. You know what, Graham? I can stand next to a large upright rock at Stonehenge, and I can get exactly the same thing without the side effects. I get the same downloads, the same visions. It takes time. It's like driving your car. You get better at it. Yeah. And I don't need the side effects, thank you very much. And I know that given the choice of leaving the body, I would leave. It's painful down here. It's hard work. Yeah, I've been on the other side several times, and I know how much easier it is. It's nice.
Your work is not for the faint of heart, is it?
You need a thick skin.
But yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Do you feel it's getting a little easier? I mean, can you see it? Kind of, people are beginning to. If you stick around long enough, I suppose people are, or not.
It's weird. I mean, it goes in cycles. I think when people are kind of happy, they tend to be much more into and open into doing things. And then when things get hard, they don't buy the books, they don't buy DVDs, they don't care. And then I'm going, well, that's the irony. All the information is really meant for you to overcome fear, anxiety, because once you get trapped into that, you're lost. A lot of the teachings that would come out of these understandings is to really have control over yourself, over the laws of emotion. Energy in motion. If you can control fear and all of those things, you're already 50% ahead of everybody else, and you can actually begin to see through the what's going on in front of you, and distance yourself from a certain degree. Not that you should do, because otherwise, what's the point of being in the physical world? You can distance yourself from the events and see the bigger picture, how they relate, how the political landscape is there to keep you in a certain level of ignorance. And the fear then takes you further away from the teachings. And at the moment, I mean, I've had no other problems with getting people on tour this year, people cancelling. They never cancel my tours. This just doesn't happen. They don't want to buy books. They're totally caught into what's going on in Washington and the world and thinking, but there's the irony, isn't it? We're teaching you how to overcome this, and now that you're in that process, now you don't want to do the teaching and apply them. So 2 years from now, they'll come back again and they'll say, I want to buy all the books, I want to go to all the lectures, I want to learn about this. Yeah, but I've been saying this for now for 20 years, and so does everybody else. We're trying to teach you to not get caught up in that. Don't forget. It's, as a friend of mine said, it's called humans being. You can lead a horse to the water. So, it's the way it is.
I did something not dissimilar to you. I mean, I sort of packed it in roundabout. It must have been Saturn return sort of time, and I gave up that corporate. Yes, and I gave up that corporate thing, riding high, got out, and and it's eventually, spent a lot of time down in New Mexico. I was in Vancouver, and I brought over a Native American Indian elder actually to London. I visited him in Colorado, and his name was Ihanamani, and he wrote a lovely book actually called. And I got him onto Radio 4 with Libby Purvis and all of that, and there was suddenly, I started doing the talks a little bit because there was such a good response from him.
Yeah,
and I just thought, same thing, no money coming in from any source. But I thought that actually in the end I'd just try and start a magazine that could act as a sort of Trojan horse for some of this material, like, people like you.
I've worked at the environment for many years, and it's like talking to a brick wall. There's people saying, well, we so need this. I mean, there's a big gap where we could do this in a really entertaining way.
Yeah.
Kind of like Ancient Aliens, except most of the stuff in Ancient Aliens, I'm going to be on record about this, it's absolute bollocks. You can't justify any of this stuff. It's all just opinions that become associated as facts. Yeah. Even I've been on there as well. I mean, they actually cut me out, the whole hour's interview down to 15 seconds, because I kept giving them facts in a very entertaining way. Because I can play the media, I know how it works. But even so, I wasn't saying what they wanted to hear. It's all built by aliens. I said, well, there's no evidence to back that up. Maybe it was, but we can't back it up. I think humans are actually much more clever than we give ourselves credit for.
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's about the closest we actually got in any program that's ever come along that's trying to build this. I remember back years ago in the 70s, there was a program called Connections with a science guy. Oh, what was his name? James Burke.
Oh yes, I remember James Burke. Yeah. He had the glasses.
Yeah, the big thick glasses. And he basically was making it wasn't totally spiritual, but at least it was going through science and certain metaphysics, and you could see this wonderful technical way of getting geeky information across that was totally entertaining. I was riveted by it. And there's a way to do that also with what we're talking about, I'm sure. It just takes someone within the management to have the guts to do it, and not to make it superficial.
Yes, I mean, I interviewed Jane Goodall for the last issue of Aha. She's lovely. And if you go to my site, you'll see the interview I did with her. But also I did one with Bruce Lipton, who's an interesting guy as well, because he was a cell biologist, epigenetics and all of that. But I got him talking not about epigenetics, because we write it, but more from the point of view of nature and where we are in the world. It was a kind of the meaning of life conversation. So that's what the magazine's sort of setting out to do, and I'm starting now to put on talks, regular talks in London, and
good for you.
and to build it all up. So it would be great to somewhere down the line, maybe a year down the line, it coincide with you coming over the next time you're over in May or something. It would be great.
Yeah, give me plenty of warning, because at least 4 months, because I have to get my tickets sorted out. I'm very tall, so I have to buy my plane tickets almost 4 months in advance, so I might be able to afford a extra room seat. Yeah. So,
but would it probably be May again, Freddy? I mean,
it's usually May and September, because the weather is so ridiculous now in the British Isles because of the collapse of the currents, what's it called, Gulf Stream. Yeah. That I'm finding that because so much of our stuff is done outdoors, that I have to be very wary of the weather, especially in Scotland. So I find that mid-May, sort of middle of September, tend to be the best times where you can go, and it's off-season. That
would be great. I mean, what we could do is actually just attach it to the end of your trip, and it's coming through London before you fly out, or whatever you're doing.
That'd be great.
But no, seriously, we'll aim for May, and I'll just stay in touch and keep you,
absolutely,
and that'd be brilliant.
In fact, it's funny that you're doing a magazine called Aha, because years ago I actually had one called
I thought about that. No,
I still got the copyright on it. I got the designs and everything. I thought, we got let down by a total charlatan who said that he had a couple of million quid and he didn't have a penny. He's a complete charlatan. Yeah. So I've got all this stuff there, and I thought we could do this in a really entertaining way that looks modern. It's not going to do your head in, but it has a lot of pictures. Like I had, Gerald Hawkins talk about diatonic ratios in crop circles. You think, I'm not going to read that. I said, Gerald, can you draw me some pictures? Oh, absolutely. I'll just draw you some diagrams. Brilliant. Yeah. Anybody can get that. Yeah, and the best thing is you can overlay it over crop circles. They actually have new mathematical theorems, and that's how we got the information across. Crop circle with mathematicals, and you can see it go, wow, it works.
And do you know the work? Do you know the work of Harry Oldfield?
No, but I went to one of his presentations, and he was wonderful.
Yeah,
it was actually in Denver. Yeah.
Yeah, he's
that was great.
Yeah, he's somebody who I think you'd find interesting. Maybe dig a little deeper in with the sound and everything, and sound healing. And I also contacted a guy called Lloyd Meir, who's everything by numbers. Regina actually interviewed him about a couple of years ago.
It has to be good.
And it's all frequency, it's all numbers, and so for every condition, everything has a number. I mean, literally.
Oh, it's like numerology, absolutely.
Absolutely. So he's dowsed it all. So it's literally from any ailments. It's quite extraordinary, actually. And
it sounds like it's linked to radionics in some way as well.
Yes. Yeah.
Like John Michel used to do the encoding of numbers in ancient texts and found the numbers hardwired to the measurements of Glastonbury Abbey and things like that. Wow. Yeah, you can reduce everything to number.
Yes.
It's very boring to look at. You need pictures to go with them.
Yeah.
I'm the same way. It's like, it's interesting, but give me a picture.
Exactly. Yes. Well, the Japanese culture, Chinese culture is all pictures too, isn't it? I mean, they tend to have more pictures than words in a way. Sometimes it's just kind of interesting the way their brain works. That they'll, there's actually a mountain. It actually looks like a mountain when it's written. You know what I mean? So
it's like an ideogram. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think there's so much stuff there that we haven't even begun to scratch at the surface.
Yeah.
Like I said, it all depends when it gets translated from one language to the other, and we're able to have better access to it. It's coming. And there's one guy here, actually shares the same publisher as I do, wrote a great book on deciphering the prehistoric Japanese texts. I learned so much about the history of ancient China, which no one knows about, goes back at least 9,000 years.
Wow.
It's amazing stuff.
Yeah.
And it's about the resurrection concept out there as well.
Yeah.
And the way which they seem to be practicing.
Yeah.
It goes back to them, and I went, my God, I put there's another chapter to this book. Thank God for that.
Yeah.
So anyway, I got to shoot off. It's 1 o'clock.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Freddie. I wish I could buy you a pint, but hopefully we can do that at some point in the next year or so when you're able.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Done.
Thanks so much.
Appreciate it. Good luck with the magazine.
Thank you. Okay.